Last year, Americans spent over $2 billion on raised garden beds. The average backyard gardener now drops somewhere between $300 and $650 just to fill a single 4x8 wooden box with lumber, store-bought soil, and amendments. Then each spring they spend another $100 on fertilizer, another $50 on irrigation parts, and within 5 to 6 years, the wood rots out. The soil collapses, and they start the entire cycle over again. Garden centers love this. Lumber yards love this. Bagged soil companies love this. Drip irrigation manufacturers love this. What looks like one purchase is actually a subscription you signed up for without realizing it. Now, what if I told you there is a method that costs $0 to build, produces larger harvests than any raised bed, waters itself after the second year, fertilizes itself for 2 decades, and gets more productive every single growing season until the day you die? What if I told you this method is not new? It is not a hack. It is not something a content creator discovered last summer. It is ancient. It was practiced by European farmers for centuries before there was even a word for it. It was finally written down by an Austrian botanist in 1962, and it was pushed to its absolute limits by a single mountain farmer who was fined hundreds of times and threatened with prison for refusing to abandon it. The only reason you have never seen this method in a single advertisement, on a single garden center display, or in a single mainstream gardening magazine is because there is nothing in it that anyone can sell you. This is the story of the $0 garden that quietly killed the raised bed before the raised bed industry even existed. And it is the story of why every garden store in America has a powerful financial reason to make sure you never find out about it. Welcome back. If you have ever walked into a hardware store, looked at the towering display of cedar boards and bagged soil and irrigation kits, and felt that vague suspicion that gardening should not actually cost this much money, you are about to learn that you were right. The technique I am going to walk you through was never lost. It was buried. Buried under decades of marketing. Buried under the rise of mechanized agriculture. Buried under the convenient assumption that anything traditional must be primitive. The truth is the opposite. The traditional method works better. It always worked better. We just stopped doing it because flat fields are easier for tractors to roll over and easier for chemical companies to sell fertilizer into. The story of this method spans 3 continents, 3 centuries, and a quiet revolution in soil biology that mainstream science has only accepted in the last 25 years. By the time we are done here, you will understand how to build it, why it cannot be bottled and sold, why no garden center will ever stock it, and why the very existence of this technique threatens one of the most profitable subscription models in modern consumer life. We have to start in Germany with a small gardening booklet that almost no one outside of Central Europe has ever read. In 1962, in a country still rebuilding from the wreckage of the Second World War, a German botanist and avid gardener named Hermann Andra published a thin booklet that should have rewritten gardening textbooks across the Western world. The title, translated into English, was something like Mound Culture, the gardening method of the future. Andra was not inventing anything. He was documenting something. As a young boy, he had watched plants grow wild and abundant from a pile of rotting woody debris in his grandmother's garden. No one watered that pile, no one tended it, no one fertilized it. Yet whatever sprouted from it grew taller, greener, and heavier with fruit than anything else on the property. Andra spent years asking the same question: why? The answer, when he finally pieced it together, drew on something even older. He had been influenced by the writings of an earlier Austrian philosopher named Rudolf Steiner, whose 1924 lecture on biodynamic farming contained a striking instruction. Steiner told farmers that if they wanted to bring inorganic earth fully to life, they should mix it with decaying material and shape it into earthen hillocks. The earth itself, he claimed, would then come alive. Andra read those words. He looked at his grandmother's brush pile, and he realized that medieval farmers across Germany and Eastern Europe had been doing exactly this for centuries. They had been piling fallen trees, dead branches, kitchen waste, animal manure, and whatever organic matter they could find into long mounds. They had been covering those mounds with whatever soil they could scrape together, and they had been planting directly into the surface. These farmers did not have agricultural degrees. They did not have soil tests. They had hungry families and difficult land. And out of pure necessity, they had discovered something that modern science would not formally validate for another 50 years. Andra's booklet was revised and reprinted multiple times through the 1970s and 80s, eventually with the help of another German horticulturalist named Hans Bieber. Together, their work spread the mound culture concept across German-speaking Europe. But here is the part that explains why almost nobody in the English-speaking world heard about any of this for the next 4 decades. The booklet was never officially translated into English. It existed only in German. It was sold mostly in small gardening bookshops in Bavaria and Austria. It had no marketing budget. It had no celebrity endorsement. It had no corporate sponsor. It spread the way it had always spread for centuries before Andra gave it a name. Word of mouth, garden to garden, grandmother to grandchild. And when the 20th century arrived in full force, with its tractors and chemical fertilizers and picture-perfect rows of plowed flat fields, word of mouth was simply not loud enough. The German booklet sat on a few shelves, the technique sat in a few gardens, and the rest of the world, distracted by easier-looking promises from the agricultural chemistry industry, forgot it existed. The story would probably have ended there if not for one man. One stubborn, infuriating, brilliant Austrian mountain farmer who refused to be told what could and could not grow on his land. Josef Holzer, known to almost everyone simply as Sepp, was born on July 24, 1942, on a high-altitude family farm in the state of Salzburg, Austria. The farm sat on the southern slope of a mountain at elevations ranging from 1,100 meters at its lower edge to 1,500 meters at the upper limits. 1,100 meters is over 3,600 feet. 1,500 meters is nearly 5,000 feet. The region is so cold that locals call it Austria's mini-Siberia. It records around 170 frost days every year. About 50 of those are days when the thermometer never climbs above 0 degrees Celsius. Winter temperatures regularly hit minus 20 degrees Celsius. The soil is thin. The growing season is painfully short. The land had supported subsistence farming for generations, but the families who worked it produced barely enough food to survive winter. In 1962, the same year Hermann Andra published his booklet 1,000 kilometers to the north, Sepp Holzer took over the family farm. He was 19 years old. He had completed standard agricultural training. He knew exactly what the experts said he was supposed to do. Flat fields, straight rows, tested seeds, chemical fertilizer, synthetic pesticides, government-approved crops. For the first several years he followed that conventional wisdom, and the results were disastrous. The farm fell deeper into debt. The crops failed against the cold, the soil washed away. By the early 1970s, Holzer made a decision that horrified every agricultural official in the region. He threw out the textbook. He stopped pruning his fruit trees. He stopped buying fertilizer. He stopped following anyone's rules. Instead, he started watching. He watched the forest. He watched what grew where without any human intervention. He watched what happened when a tree fell and rotted in place. And then, with no formal knowledge of Andra's booklet, no theoretical framework, he started building mounds. He piled logs and branches into massive ridges across his slopes. He covered them with earth and sod. He planted directly into the surface. And then he did something that should have been impossible at 5,000 feet of elevation in the Austrian Alps. He planted citrus, lemons, kiwis, figs, grapes, cherries. The Austrian agricultural authorities did not find this charming. Inspectors arrived with clipboards. They issued violation after violation. They fined him for terracing his slopes without permits. They fined him for building unlicensed retention ponds. They fined him for not pruning his fruit trees. They fined him for digging where they said he should not dig and planting what they said he should not plant. Between the 1970s and the early 2000s, Sepp Holzer became one of the most fined farmers in the history of Austria. The Agricultural Board threatened on multiple occasions to seize the farm entirely. They threatened him with prison. He paid the fines, appealed the rulings, and kept building mounds. The Austrian biologist Bernd Loch eventually gave him a nickname that stuck across the country and then across Europe: the rebel farmer. By the early 1990s, the pressure on Holzer had become so intense that the system seemed inevitable to crush him. Then, something happened that nobody on the Agricultural Board could have anticipated. In 1995, Dr. Bernd Loch and a delegation of professors and graduate students from the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna traveled to the mountainside to see what this notorious lawbreaker was actually doing on his farm. What they found was impossible to explain through conventional agronomy. Lemon trees, heavy with ripe yellow fruit, growing against a backdrop of snow-capped peaks. Kiwi vines climbing through alpine spruce, figs swelling in mountain air, grape clusters ripening on hillsides where the neighbors could not coax a single head of cabbage. The mounds had created microclimates that defied the climate. The buried wood was holding water at depth and releasing heat at the core. The fungal networks had built soil so rich it looked like chocolate cake when you broke open a handful. Loch certified in writing that Holzer's farm fulfilled every criterion of permaculture in an exemplary manner. He called it a garden of paradise, organized by apparent chaos, behind which a living order was concealed. Today, the farm spans roughly 45 to 50 hectares of forest gardens, including 70 ponds. Sepp Holzer handed it to his son in 2009. Since 2013, Sepp himself has been living and continuing his experiments at a second, smaller farm in eastern Austria. He has consulted on landscape regeneration projects from Siberia to California, from Portugal to Thailand to Montana. Reinhold Messner, the legendary Italian mountaineer, has gone on the record describing Holzer's work as living proof that an alternative to industrial agriculture exists and works. But here is the deeper story. Sepp Holzer was not performing magic on that mountainside, and Hermann Andra was not inventing something new in his 1962 booklet. They were both rediscovering something that indigenous peoples on multiple continents had figured out independently, long before Europe even named the technique. In the Amazon rainforest, deep in the soils of pre-Columbian Brazil, archaeologists have uncovered enormous deposits of dark, fertile, almost black earth that local Portuguese-speaking communities call simply the dark earth of the Indian. These deposits, some of them several feet deep and stretching across entire hectares, were created intentionally by indigenous Amazonian civilizations more than 2,000 years ago. The recipe was buried wood, specifically wood that had been charred in oxygen-starved pits beneath layers of damp organic material, then crushed and mixed with bones, broken pottery, and manure. The resulting soil is so fertile that even today, 2,000 years after it was created, plants grow in it at rates that put surrounding rainforest soil to shame. Modern researchers consider it among the most fertile soils on Earth, and they are still trying to fully reverse engineer how it was made. Indigenous peoples in the Pacific Northwest of North America had a different name for the same observation. They watched what happened on the forest floor when an old spruce or hemlock fell. They saw that the rotting trunk became one of the most fertile growing environments in the entire forest. Foresters today call these decomposing trunks nurse logs because they nurse young seedlings to life. Walk through any remaining stand of old-growth forest in Oregon or Washington, and you will see ferns sprouting from cracks in rotting cedar. hemlock seedlings rising in straight lines along the spine of an ancient fallen Douglas fir. Entire root systems wrapped around a log like a hand wrapped around a wrist. Indigenous knowledge of the eastern woodlands tribes documented similar techniques. The Iroquois and other northeastern peoples grew the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, in raised mounds of soil amended with fish, manure, ash, and decaying plant matter. Photographs taken in Massachusetts in the 1920s documented corn hills that descended directly from these indigenous practices. Ridge structures from these mound and ridge agricultural systems are still visible in forested land across the upper Midwest today, surviving the centuries because the soil they built was simply too good to disappear. What every one of these traditions had in common was the same insight that Hermann Andra, Sepp Holzer, and medieval German farmers had independently arrived at. The forest fertilizes itself. The recipe is buried wood. The soil that results is permanent. Now we need to look beneath the surface, because the science of why this actually works is one of the most remarkable revolutions in modern biology, and it explains every observation that practitioners have been making for centuries. The first principle is mechanical. When wood begins to rot, the cellular structure of the wood slowly degrades, opening up a labyrinth of microscopic pores and channels. The decomposing log becomes, in physical fact, a sponge, not metaphorically, literally. Laboratory studies have measured the water-holding capacity of decayed wood and found absorption rates of up to 500% of dry weight. A 10-pound chunk of heavily decomposed pine can hold 50 pounds of water inside its structure. Oak, which breaks down more slowly, still doubles or triples its mass with stored moisture. Now bury several hundred pounds of wood beneath your garden. Pile soil over the top. Plant on the surface. What you have just built is an invisible underground reservoir. When it rains, the buried wood drinks the water and stores it deep where sun and wind cannot evaporate it away. During dry spells, that stored water moves upward through capillary action, feeding directly into the root zone exactly when plants need it. Field measurements taken inside these mounds during midsummer drought consistently record soil moisture readings of 40 to 60% at the core. Those are springtime moisture levels in the dead of August. The second principle is thermal. Decomposition releases heat. As fungi and bacteria break down the wood, energy is released as a byproduct. The core of an active mound can run several degrees warmer than the surrounding ground all season long. In spring, your mound is warm enough to germinate seeds, while your neighbor's flat garden is still cold and soggy. In autumn, the residual core heat buys an extra 2 to 4 weeks of growing season after the first frost. Sepp Holzer used exactly this thermal advantage to grow Mediterranean citrus on an Austrian mountainside. The third principle is the one that took mainstream science almost 2 centuries to formally accept. In August of 1997, a Canadian forest ecologist named Dr. Suzanne Simard, working at the University of British Columbia, published a paper in the prestigious journal Nature. She injected carbon isotopes into Douglas fir and paper birch trees and then traced the movement of those isotopes through the soil. What she found rewrote the textbook on how forests function. The trees were not isolated individuals competing for resources. They were connected. They were trading carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, water, and even chemical defense signals back and forth through a vast underground network of fungi. 1 teaspoon of healthy forest soil, she later documented, contains several miles of these microscopic fungal threads. The editors at Nature gave her discovery a memorable nickname on the cover. They called it the Wood Wide Web. The largest, oldest trees in the forest, which Simard called mother trees, function as central hubs in the network. They send nutrients to struggling seedlings in their shade. They receive carbohydrates from their neighbors. They warn the forest of insect attacks through chemical signals transmitted through the fungi. These mother trees act as the hubs. Simard's later research concluded that this kind of underground communication has been happening in forests for roughly 500 million years. The trees did not invent the internet. The fungi did, and the trees plugged into it. Now here is the part that changes how you should think about every garden you have ever planted. When you bury wood in a mound, you are creating the exact conditions that beneficial fungi need to colonize and spread. The decomposing wood becomes a scaffold. The fungi colonize it. They radiate outward into the surrounding soil. They wrap around the roots of every plant you grow on the mound. Suddenly your tomato is not just feeding from the inch of soil around its roots. It is plugged into a network that extends through the entire mound, accessing water and minerals from cubic feet of underground volume that its own root system could never reach. This is why these beds become more productive over time rather than less. Each year, the fungal network grows more complex. The connections multiply. The exchange efficiency improves. Your garden is not just surviving, it is building a permanent underground infrastructure, a living web that will serve every generation of plants you ever grow in that location. This infrastructure is permanent. No bag of fertilizer does this. No drip irrigation does this. No raised bed kit can come close. Now, I need to confront the single biggest piece of misinformation that has kept gardeners from trying this method for the past 30 years. You have heard it on forums, you have read it in extension service pamphlets, you may have heard it from a well-meaning friend or another video. The warning goes something like this. Do not bury wood in your garden. Wood is high in carbon. As it decomposes, microbes will steal nitrogen from your soil to fuel the breakdown. Your plants will yellow, your yields will collapse, your garden will fail. It sounds scientific, it sounds reasonable, and it is wrong. The misunderstanding comes from confusing two completely different decomposition processes. Fine wood material like sawdust or fresh wood chips is decomposed primarily by bacteria, and bacteria are indeed inefficient with nitrogen. They will compete with your plants for it during the breakdown process, but large pieces of wood, the kind you actually use in this method, are decomposed primarily by fungi. And fungi behave fundamentally differently. They recycle nitrogen through their networks. They do not deplete the soil, they redistribute resources. Field studies have repeatedly confirmed that mature mound beds show equal or higher nitrogen levels than control plots, not lower. A recent study examining permaculture sites that bury wood at scale documented 27% higher soil carbon, 20% lower bulk density, and a stunning 201% increase in earthworm populations compared to surrounding agricultural ground. Earthworms tell you everything. Earthworms only show up in soil that supports them. A mound full of fungi, moisture, and decomposing organic matter is paradise for them, and where they thrive, soil thrives. The nitrogen myth was real science applied to the wrong situation. Once you understand that, the warning evaporates. So let me walk you through how to actually build one. I am going to flag the specific mistakes that have ruined so many beginner mounds, because most tutorials skip these details. Start by choosing your location. Full sun is best for most vegetables. You do not have to dig a trench, but if you do, going down about a foot before you build up gives you extra reservoir capacity and faster moisture contact. If you are building directly on a lawn, lay down a layer of cardboard first to smother the grass. Next comes the foundation, and this is the most important layer. You want the largest, oldest, most rotten logs you can find. The more decayed the wood already is, the faster the mound activates. If a log is soft enough that you can crumble it in your hand, that is gold. If it is already covered in white fungal threads, even better. The fungi are already established and ready to spread. Hardwoods generally outperform softwoods in this application. The recommended species, roughly in order of suitability, are alder, apple, birch, cottonwood, maple, oak, poplar, and dry willow. Each of these decomposes at a useful rate without releasing growth inhibitors. Now the critical warnings. Never use cedar. Cedar contains natural preservatives that resist decomposition and can suppress plant growth for years. Never use black walnut. Black walnut roots and wood contain a chemical that is toxic to many garden plants, including tomatoes, peppers, and most members of the rose family. Never use black cherry, which produces similar toxic compounds. And absolutely never use pressure-treated, painted, or stained lumber. Those chemicals leach directly into the soil and ultimately into the food you grow. A piece of advice most tutorials skip. The wood you need is almost always available for free. Most cities haul away storm-damaged trees at municipal expense. Tree service companies pay to dispose of the wood they cut. Public works departments dump fallen branches into landfill at a cost. You are solving their problem by taking it off their hands. Call your city's parks department. Call local arborists. Ask neighbors who have just had trees cut down. Many gardeners have built entire mounds without spending a single dollar on materials. Stack your logs tightly. Fill every gap with smaller branches and twigs. Air pockets are not your friend. Every void in the structure becomes a future sinkhole that will collapse as the wood softens, pulling your plants downward. Pack the structure dense and stable. Now the layer that determines whether your first year succeeds or fails. On top of the wood, before you add any soil, you must put down a thick layer of nitrogen-rich material. This is non-negotiable. Fresh grass clippings, fresh manure, kitchen scraps, coffee grounds, urine if you are inclined, all of these work. The microbes breaking down the wood need that initial nitrogen surge to fuel the engine. Without it, they will scavenge nitrogen from anywhere they can find it, including the topsoil that contains your seedling's roots. This is the source of the yellow stunted plants horror story. Skip this layer and you become the cautionary tale. Add it and you sail through the startup phase. On top of the nitrogen layer, add leaves, straw, or other carbon-rich brown matter. Then, cap the entire mound with 6 to 10 inches of topsoil mixed with finished compost. That cap is your planting layer. If you have to spend any money at all on this project, this is where it goes, and the cost is usually somewhere between $20 and $50 depending on whether you buy soil in bags or have it delivered. Compare that to the $300 to $600 to build and fill a single raised bed. The economics are not subtle. Water the mound thoroughly during the first growing season. Plant heavy feeders in year 1. Squash, pumpkins, zucchini, cucumbers, and tomatoes will explode on the initial nutrient surge from the green nitrogen layer. In year 1, the wood is fresh. Bacteria and fungi are colonizing the logs. The core temperature is already running warmer than the surrounding ground. You are watering, but less than you would a flat bed, because the wood is already starting to absorb moisture. Your heavy feeders thrive on the initial green layer nitrogen burst. In year 2, the fungal networks are established. The wood core is holding significantly more water. Most practitioners report cutting their watering in half or eliminating it entirely after this point. The soil is visibly darker and richer. Earthworm populations are exploding. The biological engine is fully operational. In years 3 through 5, the magic accelerates. The fungal network is now extensive, connecting every plant on the mound to nutrient pools throughout the entire structure. Soil tests at this stage typically show higher nitrogen and phosphorus than the surrounding ground, not lower. The mound has settled by perhaps a third of its original height, but the remaining mass is dense with biological activity. Plant disease resistance increases because the fungal network allows plants to share chemical defense signals. In years 5 through 10, the original logs are heavily decomposed throughout, soft and spongy. Their water-holding capacity is at peak performance. The soil structure is loose, crumbly, and visibly alive. This is soil you could not buy if you spent $1,000 at a garden center, because no amount of money will purchase the kind of fertility that only time and biology can build. In years 10 through 20, hardwood logs are still slowly decomposing, still releasing trace nutrients, still holding water. The mound has settled substantially, but the soil it has built is among the richest garden soil on Earth. Many practitioners at this stage simply construct a new mound on top of the old one, beginning a fresh 20-year cycle with already perfected soil beneath it. This is the comparison that ends the debate. A raised bed is at its best the day you fill it. From that moment forward, it only depletes. Nutrients leach out, wood rots, soil settles. Every year demands more inputs to maintain baseline fertility. A buried wood mound is at its worst the day you build it. From that moment forward, it only improves. The trajectories are mirror images. One demands more from you every year, the other gives more. So here is the question that explains why no one taught you any of this in a garden center. If this method is so effective, if it works on 3 continents, if the science fully supports it, if it costs essentially nothing, why does no commercial gardening retailer carry information about it? Why is every garden store packed wall to wall with raised bed kits and bags of soil and bottles of fertilizer and drip irrigation systems, but not one display about buried wood? Follow the money. A standard raised bed kit retails for $100 to $300. The soil to fill it costs another $100 to $200. Annual fertilizer runs $40 to $60. Drip irrigation parts add another $50 to $80. Wood rots and needs replacement every 5 to 7 years. Soil compacts and depletes and needs amending every season. This is not a garden. It is a subscription service with a piece of wood involved. Buried wood mounds use materials that most homeowners pay to throw away. Fallen branches after a storm, yard waste in autumn, kitchen scraps that go into the trash, leaves that pile up every fall. The average American household actually spends $50 to $200 per year having this exact material hauled to a landfill. You are paying someone to take away the ingredients of the most productive garden you will ever grow. Over a 10-year period, 4 raised beds cost the average backyard gardener between $3,000 and $6,000. 4 mounds of the same growing area cost between $0 and $200 total. They produce higher yields after the second season, eliminate the need for irrigation and most fertilizer, and continue improving rather than declining. A method that turns trash into abundance, that requires no purchased inputs, that gets better instead of worse, and that eliminates almost every product a garden store sells is not just unmarketable, it is a direct threat to the business model. And what threatens the business model gets forgotten until someone is willing to find it again. In 2009, Sepp Holzer handed his mountainside farm to his son. The mounds his father built in the 1970s were still producing. The soil was richer than the day it was built. The ponds were still full. The lemons were still ripening in the snow. A farm built from materials his neighbors burned as garbage, started by a 19-year-old who was told he could not possibly succeed, outlasted hundreds of fines, repeated threats of land seizure, and decades of expert dismissal. The ground responds to biology. The biology is settled. Bury wood, cover it with soil, plant on top. Let the forest do what the forest has been doing for 300 million years. If this changed how you think about gardening, share it with someone who is about to drop $600 on a raised bed kit. Before you click away, know that the method you just learned pairs with one specific kitchen ingredient that almost no gardener uses correctly. When you stack the 2 techniques together, your soil stops looking like garden dirt and starts looking like the floor of an old-growth forest. The full method is in the next video, and it is sitting on your screen right now. Click it next and finish what we started here. The ground is patient. It remembers what you give it. Give it wood, and it gives you decades. The harvest begins now.